I'm just an extra in the family. They don't say it out loud anymore. Not like they did when I was younger. Now it's in the way the silence drops when I walk into a room. In the way no one looks up from their phone. In the way my plate is always placed last on the long dining table like an afterthought. Tonight I sat in the guesthouse kitchen, eating cold leftovers off a paper towel. The main house was lit up like a palace. Sounds of glasses clinking, polite laughter, echoing faintly through the garden. Some charity dinner. Everyone dressed in black and gold. Everyone pretending to be good. I wasn't invited, of course. I've never been. Mom once told me I was too sensitive to stimulation. The lights, the music, the crowd. That she was protecting me by keeping me out of sight. But even when I learned how to sit still, how to wear the right clothes, how to smile without wrinkling my eyes, nothing changed. I was still the one they hid. When the help brought over a plate of untouched canapes, she didn't speak. Just placed it on the side table and left. I nodded, even said thank you, but she didn't look back. I've learned how to be invisible. It's a quiet skill like holding your breath underwater. No splashing, no noise, just disappear. In the corner of the guest house on the bookshelf, there's a framed photo of me and my mother. I was about 6. We were sitting on the grass. I'm laughing, really laughing, with juice all over my chin. She's holding me with both arms like I'm the center of her world. That was before she started using words like fixable and treatment. Before she called me her project. That photo is the only thing I kept when I moved out of the main house and into what Dad calls the garden wing, like I'm some kind of staff. They said it was for my comfort. More quiet, more space. But it's really just farther away. I watch them sometimes from the window, my parents, my older brother Nathaniel, even my little sister Claire, who's learned not to mention me when her friends are over. They live in a world of gold-trimmed mirrors and clean reputations. A family that hosts galas and makes headlines for their donations. But they don't talk about me. I don't exist in the family newsletter, the framed holiday cards, or the digital portrait wall in the foyer. And yet, I'm still here. Still folding their laundry. Still answering when they call my name. Still trying not to cry when they pretend they didn't. It's a strange thing to be needed and hidden at the same time. But I stay. I always stay. Because maybe I'll matter again. Just not tonight. I was 9 when it happened the first time, the moment I truly understood I didn't belong. It was summer. The house was loud with guests, and music and the smell of grilled lamb filled the patio. I had dressed myself in khaki shorts and a tucked-in shirt just like Nathaniel. I even combed my hair the way Dad did, straight back, no part. I wanted to show them I could be proper. I remember clutching a little book about trees. I had memorized all the Latin names. I wanted to share them with the guests, with Dad especially. He loved to talk business and golf, but I thought maybe he'd be proud if I showed him how much I'd learned on my own. I waited by the outdoor bar, standing as still as I could. I didn't interrupt. I waited for a pause in his story. "Dad," I said, holding out the book with both hands. He didn't turn toward me, didn't even glance. Instead, he said, almost lazily to the man beside him, "Ignore that one. He's just around." I felt something crack then. Not loud, not sharp, just a soft crumble deep inside. The man chuckled. Not cruelly, more like someone humoring an awkward joke. I looked at my book, the pages starting to shake in my fingers. I know all the names I whispered, but no one heard me. I stood there for what felt like minutes, the sun hot on my shoulders, before I walked back inside, past the guests, through the hallway, and into the linen closet, the only place that smelled like comfort. I stayed there until dinner. That night, Mom knocked on my door. She didn't come in. Just said, "You can't do that again, Daniel." People notice, and it makes them uncomfortable. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I was okay. Just that I had to stop making people feel uneasy. That I had to be easier. That was the first time I realized my feelings didn't matter here. What mattered was appearance, smoothness, reputation. From that day, I stopped bringing books to the patio. I stopped asking questions at dinner. I stopped calling out to Dad when I heard his car pull in. I began to observe instead. I watched the way Claire giggled and leaned her head on Mom's shoulder. The way Nathaniel got away with slamming doors. The way everyone seemed to take up space, without fear, without shame. And then there was me, careful, small, always calculating how not to bother anyone. That day, that moment by the bar became a seed. And over time, it grew into a quiet forest of silence. I still have that tree book. It's under my bed. The spine is worn, but the names are still there. I remember everyone. But I've stopped telling people. Because no one listens when they've already decided what you are. There's a certain smell to wealth, polished wood, leather, jasmine diffusers, time to spray every 15 minutes. That was the world I lived in. Not as a son, though. More like a misplaced ornament. I didn't shine the way they wanted, so they tucked me in the corner. My mother, Madeleine, was once warm, I think. There are days when I'm sure I didn't imagine her hand in mine at the park or the way she used to hum while brushing my hair. But those moments evaporated the year I turned 11. That's when she started saying things like, "We'll have to fix this, Daniel." She never said what this was, exactly just the way I walked. The way I flinched when people got too close. The way I repeated things to feel calm. It embarrassed her. "You must understand," she told me once. Kneeling in front of me in her beige heels and perfectly pressed dress, "We love you. But there are expectations. We can't have people thinking we're neglectful, that we raised someone broken." She said it with the gentlest voice, like she was explaining the weather. But I felt it hit like ice. Dad was worse. He didn't pretend. He just ignored. When I tried to join family photos, he would sigh and murmur, "Just let the other two stand in front. We'll crop it anyway." Nathaniel was a golden child, straight A's, tennis trophies, mock trial captain. He wore Dad's approval like a crown. Claire was the little rose, delicate, charming, never reprimanded for anything. She once told me when we were both sitting on the staircase past bedtime, "I think they're scared of you, Danny. You say weird stuff and don't laugh right." I smiled at her. She was too young to be cruel. But even at 7, she knew what the rules were. Blend in. Behave. Don't be weird. They weren't violent. No bruises. No screaming. That would have been easier to explain. What they gave me was quiet erasure. Like I was always present but never included. I was 13 when they moved me to the guest house. They said it was a space of independence. I had a kitchenette, a small room, even a private entrance. It felt like exile. My things were moved while I was at school. No warning. Just a note on the fridge. "Your room is now in the guest house. We'll bring your things over." I remember standing in the middle of that new space, beige carpet, one window, no warmth, holding the photo of me and Mom in the grass. It was in a plastic grocery bag with some clothes and a broken Rubik's Cube. No frame. That night, I didn't cry. I just laid in bed and counted the seconds between the diffusers in the main house. I timed it. 15 minutes on the dot, the jasmine would spray. That was how I knew they were still there, still pretending. I thought about leaving once. I was 16. My backpack was already packed, a few clothes. Some granola bars, my ID, and the photo of Mom and me, which I'd finally put in a real frame. I'd saved up $264, working part-time at a bookstore across town. No one noticed I was gone most afternoons anyway. I figured I could sleep at the train station for a night, maybe find a job somewhere quieter, where no one knew who I was. But I didn't leave. Not because I was afraid, not exactly. It was because of Claire. That night, I stood outside the main house for a long time, watching her through the kitchen window. She was sitting on a stool, swinging her legs, trying to cut up an apple, while the nanny scrolled on her phone. She looked up and saw me in the dark. She didn't smile, just blinked like she was trying to remember if I was real. Then she slid off the stool and came to the glass, pressed her hand against it. I pressed mine back. We stood like that for maybe 10 seconds. Then she mouthed, "Don't go." She didn't even know I had packed, but somehow she felt it. She always did, so I stayed. The next day, I unpacked everything, put the granola bars back in the drawer, slid the photo under my pillow, went to school like normal, did my chores, said nothing. And that became the pattern. Every time I came close to choosing myself, to choosing freedom, there was always something or someone pulling me back. A look, a memory, a whisper from the past family sticks together. Even when it cuts, even when it suffocates. I told myself I was strong for staying, that enduring was noble, that love was sacrifice. But sometimes I wonder if I was just trained, conditioned to accept the cold because it was familiar, like a dog waiting by the door for a master who forgot it was ever let inside. I kept my silence because if I spoke up, if I exposed their cruelty even gently, it would make me the villain. People like my parents are expert architects of perception. They could turn me into an ungrateful child in 3 words or less. They'd say Daniel's just sensitive, or he's had problems since he was a baby. They'd smile while saying it, tilt their heads, use soft voices. The world would believe them. They always did. So I stayed quiet. I held my pain like a folded note in my pocket, always close, never shared. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than a scream. But that silence, it protected them. And somehow, I convinced myself that meant it protected me too. Some wounds don't bleed, they just sit there, quiet. Every day a little deeper. I learned how to smile without my eyes. How to nod in conversations I wasn't part of. How to make myself useful. Folding laundry. Organizing receipts. Polishing silverware no one used. It gave me a rhythm. Something to do while they forgot I existed. There was a dinner party once. I was 17. They asked me to help in the kitchen because the caterer was running late. I cooked 3 trays of hors d'oeuvres, refilled the wine fridge, and even ironed the backup tablecloths without anyone asking. When guests arrived, I slipped back to the guest house. I knew the rules. But halfway through the evening, I heard my name. I paused near the garden steps, just long enough to catch a fragment of Mom's voice through the hedge. Daniel, oh, he's sweet but slow. It's better he keeps to himself. Less stress for everyone. Laughter. Not mean exactly, just dismissive. Shrugging off a person like a wrinkle in a napkin. That one stung more than I expected. Because I tried so hard. I wanted her to be proud of me even if just for being invisible in the right way. Later that night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, tracing the contours of my face. I tried to see what they saw. Something defective, a flaw, a shadow. But all I saw was me. Quiet eyes, tired skin. A boy who didn't ask for much. I pressed my forehead to the cool tile and thought, why am I still here? And yet the next morning I made their coffee, just the way they liked it. Dad took his without saying thank you. Claire was rushing and barely noticed the steaming mug. Mom walked by, paused, looked at it, then picked it up and said, "You finally remembered no foam." It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd gotten in weeks. So I stored it like treasure. That's how it was moments of crumbs I called love. A glance, a pause, a non-insult. I took them all, arranged them like broken beads on a necklace, wore them like proof that I still mattered. Even Nathaniel, who barely spoke to me unless it was to correct something, once tossed me a protein bar when he thought I looked pale. I kept the wrapper in my drawer for months. It felt like a handshake I didn't have to ask for. I don't think they knew how hungry I was. Not for food, but for something to fill the space between my chest and the world. Something kind. Something that said, "You belong." But they never said that. So I said it to myself, in the mirror, in the quiet, over and over. You belong, even when no one else believed it. I was 18 when everything finally broke. It was a Sunday brunch, one of those stiff, curated performances my parents loved. The house was full of clients and donors and women with glassy smiles. Nathaniel was home from college, charming everyone like always. Claire sat next to Mom wearing the dress I'd helped her iron that morning. I wasn't supposed to be there, but the server called in sick, and Mom asked in that voice she used, when it wasn't really a question, if I could help quietly. I nodded. Of course I nodded. I wore a white button-up and gray slacks. Hair combed. Movements small. I moved between tables with a tray of mimosas, head down, heart muted. It was going well, until I dropped a glass. It slipped from the tray, just a twitch in my fingers, a stutter in my thoughts. Shattered on the floor like a firecracker. Everyone turned. Mom's smile faltered. Dad's jaw tightened. I bent down to clean it, hands trembling, heat rising in my face. "Leave it," Mom said through clenched teeth. "Just go back, now." But I stayed frozen. I whispered, "I'm sorry," not to her, to the floor maybe, to the glass, to myself. Then she said it, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "This is what I warned you about. He's not normal. We just try to keep things calm. Normal." It rang in my ears like a siren. The guests looked away, some out of pity, some out of discomfort, but no one said anything, not even Claire. I walked out, not fast, not dramatically. I left the glass, the tray, the noise. Just stepped through the back patio doors, across the grass, and into the guest house. I locked the door behind me, sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even speak. Just sat there feeling my chest open like a fault line, quiet and irreversible. I don't know how long I stayed like that. The light shifted. The house grew silent again. No one came to check on me. No one knocked, not even to scold. I was used to that. What I wasn't used to was the stillness inside me. Not panic, not grief, just clarity. This was who they were. And this was who I was to them. An inconvenience. A stain they tried to scrub out of the family portrait. I stood up, went to the mirror, looked into my own eyes. And for the first time, I didn't ask why. I didn't wonder what I could do better. I just accepted the answer, nothing. Nothing would ever be enough for them. And maybe that didn't mean I was broken. Maybe it just meant I was done pretending. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, the old photo of me and Mom in my hands. The frame had chipped at one corner. I remember tracing it with my thumb over and over, like maybe if I held it tightly enough I could rewind time. Go back to when her arms held me like I was everything. But she wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe she never was. Maybe that photo lied. At some point I pulled out a small box from under my bed. Inside were things no one knew. I kept a ribbon Claire dropped on her 7th birthday, the wrapper from that protein bar. Nathaniel tossed me an old letter I wrote to Dad, but never sent, asking him to come watch my school play. He didn't, of course. Said he had an investor lunch. I played a tree. Didn't have any lines. And then at the very bottom of the box I found the gift. A small wooden duck. I'd carved it myself when I was 12 and gave it to Mom for her birthday. She smiled when she opened it, then quietly placed it behind a vase. A week later, it disappeared. I thought she threw it out. But Claire had found it in a drawer 2 years ago and brought it to me, whispering, "You should keep this." I stared at it now in my palm. A lopsided thing. The beak was wrong. But I had made it with such care. Every curve of the wing, every dent from the sandpaper, it was mine. I don't know why, but that duck broke me. Maybe because it was the last time I created something with love and gave it freely without fear of rejection. I cried. Not loud, not messy, just steady tears sliding down my cheeks like rain on glass. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel all of it, the ache, the loneliness, the quiet hope that had clung to me like fog. I whispered I didn't do anything wrong. I said it again, louder. I didn't do anything wrong. And I believed it. It didn't change the past, didn't undo the pain, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years: ownership of my truth. I was not broken. I was not defective. I was just different. And they couldn't love different. That wasn't my failure. It was theirs. That was the turning point. Not anger, not revenge. Just the decision to stop waiting for their approval like a dog waits for a door to open. I didn't belong here. But maybe somewhere I could. I left the next morning. No arguments, no confrontations, no notes. I didn't slam doors or pack in a frenzy. I folded each item with care, a few shirts, a sweater. Claire once said made me look kind, the tree book, the duck, and of course, the photo. Still chipped, still sacred. The sky was just starting to turn pale. That soft blue that only exists when the world is still asleep. The mansion was quiet, all its grandeur dimmed in the morning hush. I looked up at its tall windows one last time. The way the light never seemed warm even when it was bright. I didn't feel angry, just hollow. Like I'd spent so many years screaming inside, and now, finally, there was nothing left to say. As I stepped through the side gate, I paused not for nostalgia, but to listen. I heard the jasmine diffuser hiss. 15 minutes on the dot. Even now, they were still keeping time perfectly, like nothing had changed. I walked past the garden where we used to take family pictures, past the fountain no one filled anymore. The world didn't shatter. No one came running after me. Not even Claire. And that's how I knew I had made the right choice. I took the bus to a town 2 hours away. No plan, just space, just quiet that didn't feel like rejection. At the station, I sat on a bench and watched strangers come and go. Some looked lost, others excited. Everyone moving, everyone choosing. I held the photo in my lap, not to cry over it, but to say goodbye. Then I did something I never thought I would. I slid it out of the frame. I folded it gently once, twice, then placed it in the back of my journal. Not on display anymore. Not a centerpiece, just part of the story. I kept the duck in my coat pocket. It felt right, like a small reminder of the child in me who once tried and tried and tried to be loved the way he deserved. And now he was finally walking away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wouldn't be going back. Not to the guest house, not to the silences, not to be in a shadow in a house of light. I had carried their shame like a second skin, worn it so long I thought it was mine, but it never was. And now, step by step, breath by breath, I was shedding it. Not with rage, not with revenge, just with a quiet kind of freedom. It's been 3 years since I left. I live in a small town now. Quiet, unremarkable, the kind of place where people smile at you in the grocery store just because you exist. My apartment is above a bookstore, and the window creaks in the wind. The floorboards groan. But it's mine. I work mornings at the shop and spend my afternoons cataloging old books, helping children find stories about dragons or stars or dogs that talk. No one here knows my last name. No one cares that I don't always look them in the eye or that I speak slowly when I'm thinking. They just see me. Some days I still feel the old weight, the question that creeps up like fog. Was I ever loved at all? But then I make tea in my chipped blue mug, sit by the window and listen to the silence. And I remember this quiet isn't punishment anymore. It's peace. I still have the duck. It sits on my desk beside a tiny potted plant. People think it's just a trinket. But to me, it's proof that even when I was buried beneath their coldness, something inside me still believed in love, in giving, in hope. Claire wrote me a letter last year. Just one page, no return address. I remember the duck, she said. I didn't understand back then. I'm sorry. I wish I had said more. I miss you. She didn't sign it with love, just her name, but it was enough. I keep it folded behind the photo in my journal. Not to dwell, but to remind myself that even the smallest kindness can live longer than we expect. I don't talk about my parents. When people ask, I just say, it was complicated. And then I smile, not because I'm pretending, but because I survived it. Sometimes survival is the story. I've learned that healing isn't loud. It's not fireworks or breakthroughs. It's small things, washing your own dishes, laughing at a joke someone actually meant, falling asleep without bracing for the next insult. I don't need an apology from them anymore. I don't need them to see me. Because I see me now. I see the boy who stood at the garden window waiting for warmth. I see the teenager holding broken glass with trembling hands. I see the young man who left, not in anger, but in truth. And now, I see someone whole. Not because they changed, but because I did.